Hello.
Oh, hi there. How you
Hello, how
doing?
are you? Doing, actually, I'm not doing so good. I got the vaccine number 2 yesterday, and
Oh,
I spent my day in bed. I was fine until 11 a.m., and then from 11 a.m. downhill completely for 2 to 3 hours, and kind of slightly uphill since then. So
oh, sorry, but at least you've got the vaccine. That's good.
the number two, so I can't
Jealous.
complain. I can't complain. Have you been on did you receive one or two, or where are you, both of you?
I'm not
Not
old enough.
yet?
Oh, I've had both.
Okay.
Oh, Stanley's there too.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can make this so oh, hello. How you doing? Love your background.
Did you get sick at any time, Stanley, or you were good for on the 2 vaccines?
Yeah, no, I the second one I was fatigued
Yeah.
for about a day,
Uh-huh.
and my
That's what
arm
is
hurt like hell.
Yeah, that was this morning, like fatigue, and I'm like, oh, you know what? That's okay, because I was working from home,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, like over 1 hour, the chill, the fever up 101.4, and I'm like, okay, now just go to bed, pills,
Yeah.
and then
I just took the Tylenol prophylactically, so as soon as I got home, I took 2 Tylenol, and I took it for about a day, and then it was okay.
yeah, Yeah, I probably left it like probably like 1 hour too late in my kind of in taking it because I was in a business meeting and all of a sudden I started like kind of shaking. I'm like, oh,
Yeah, not
okay,
good.
not good.
So-
And Laurie,
you-
you have another meeting at 7:30, right?
Yes, I do. I do. Sorry about that.
Oh, you know,
It's something that couldn't change, so.
so
Do either of you know anybody who had COVID and then got vaccines?
Yep.
And did they have a result? Did they have something happen too?
So my stepdaughter, starting with just one in my own household, but she's 19 years old, so she didn't really get the a lot of effect when she got sick. But then when she got the Johnson and Johnson about 2 weeks ago, and immediately, yeah, like almost like 2 hours later, was really sick.
Really?
Really sick. Yep.
Ooh, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that because I had it, so I don't want to get sick.
But that was a Johnson and Johnson, and who knows how much she had it the first time. You know what I'm saying? Teenager, whatever. Hello,
point.
everybody.
Hey,
Hi.
good evening.
As you
Glad you're
can see,
feeling better.
Richard, exactly, like better is a big word, but I'm out of bed. And I'm wearing my San Osamo t-shirt, so, 'cause I took my shower half an hour ago. So
Nice.
Okay.
when you wake up at 6 p.m., that's what
Yeah.
happened. Okay, so
Josh.
just let's wait a few more minutes. We have some special guests. That's exciting.
I don't know how special, but
But it is special to us, Joshua. We don't know you. I said, I don't know you, so we're very happy to meet people, even if it's on Zoom.
I am
I
very special.
I know you now. You're San Osamo.
Yeah, I'm San Osamo.
Awesome.
Yes. Okay, so who are we missing?
How many people do we need for a quorum?
We have 4. That's all we need. We have 6 people on the commission, so we're missing Eric and Forrest.
But it is not yet 6:30.
That's true.
And do we have? So we have Alexis here. Do we else? What about? Yeah, we have Helen. I can't
But
really
Lori
see.
has to leave for another meeting at
Correct.
7:30, she says,
Yes.
Yeah.
and
So-
we'll lose our quorum at that point. If
Well,
things stay the same.
we're not making any decisions. I mean, we always want as many people as we can have. This is really a presentation night. And also to let everybody know that Fort Greene has decided that his schedule is too full and he's going to be pulling back from his liaison slots. We'll be assigning that to a new council member at the next council meeting on the 13th.
So Alexis is going to listen with her 2 ears because she can't as 2 right now.
She can carry the weight, no question.
I have no doubt about that. Okay,
Alexis and I were just on another meeting that we were worried was going to run into this one, and it went all of 8 minutes. It was maybe the quickest public meeting I've ever been at.
Wow, nice.
so can we leave it like maybe like half a minute and then
They might come in later,
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Right.
I'm just
a couple minutes late.
just should I start the meeting or do we wait for them? What do you think?
Sure. Yeah,
go
let's
ahead.
start.
Yeah, because I also want to make sure like we have the maximum time with Laurie. So we have a great meeting planned this evening. Thank you, Helen and Ade for like sending us all those documents and that great work overhead. So let's get started. I called the March 25th financial advisory meeting to order. I would like to welcome our guests and maybe Dave, you can do a bit of introduction about the guests we have this evening so we kind of all get familiar with each other.
I think I'm going to leave that to our birthday girl, Helen.
Oh, wow.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday,
Yeah,
Helen.
happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, board members. Josh, working for HDL, he have more than 20 years experience with the local governmental agency tax administration, and then he's the lead for our project as well. And then I have been working with Josh and then David, Eric in the past almost 2 years now. I think we're starting talking this topic since 2018, late and 18. And then finally now we're able to present to you tonight. Without further ado, I will hand over to Josh. Josh, ready?
Before we get into that, I have a couple of, why don't we go through a couple of our agenda items? The first one, I would like to see if we have any public online and who just may want to have some open time. Is there anybody on the phone who has any public comment?
It does not look like we have any public in attendance tonight.
Okay, thank you. At least for right now, I might code it a little bit later. Thank you. And before we move into you, Josh, I would like to, Joshua, I would like to talk about the meeting minutes from the last meeting from February. Gosh, where is my? Yes, thank you so much. I'm getting out of my fever, out of my bed right now, so bear with me. Who would like to
I make a motion.
make a motion? Thank you, Laurie.
Mhm.
I'll second.
Second. Okay, thank you, Richard. So I'm going
Stanley.
to call to order. Okay, so Laurie,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Stanley,
sorry.
Yes.
Marie, I, and I think this is the 4 we have today. Okay, so I think now we can formally, we welcome you again, Joshua, and hear what you have to present to us. Very exciting to have you.
Oh, thank you all very much for having us
Laurie,
here.
you have something?
I'm sorry, Josh, since I have to leave early, I actually kind of got ahead here, but I just have 2 very quick questions before we start. Asking the town here, what does it take to change the business license fee schedule? Is that something we have to put out for vote? Is it something the town can do, we as a committee can do?
It would be something that it's a tax, so it would have to be voted on.
It would have to be voted on. Okay. All right, and what is the business license revenue used for? Is it just general expenses or specific uses?
General expenses.
General, okay. All right, thank you. Sorry to bug you. It kind of puts
Good
my.
questions. So
place.
yes.
Yeah, all relevant, all relevant. Thank you very much. I am
Okay.
going to share my screen here for us real quick, make sure everybody can see. Are we all good? Everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
Yeah, ready to go.
All right, so as Helen said, and again, thank you everybody, and Helen for having us here. We were tasked for the last, couple of years on and off as we've been working with this program to sort of take a look at the current business tax model, what's happening both just from a tax code perspective and from a city operational perspective. Really the goal here was to sort of identify the tax, see how it was impacting the city, how it's impacting the business community, and how that sort of correlates to your similar and surrounding jurisdictions. So as we just answered a minute ago, this is a locally controlled and assessed tax, goes directly to the general fund for the purpose of the city's business and expenses, and it's adopted through the city's the town's code, and has a effect of needing a ballot measure for anything that moves forward with any changes that cause a potential increase in tax. So we really want to take a look at this, analyze all the relevant code sections, take a look at all of the sort of overarching city goals, and really kind of come up with as thorough of a report as we could. We started with sort of this analysis of where the city is and how you stand in comparison to these other jurisdictions. So we tried to do as deep dive as we could into your data. Admittedly, and in working with Helen, there's some difficulties there. There's limitations in your current systems and processes, limitations in terms of the data that's captured in the system that you're using. But we did the best we could to kind of pull it all together and get some analysis so we can do some year-to-year revenue comparisons, some percentage change, in terms of how that business tax is changing year over year. Who's paying the taxes? Where's that revenue contribution coming from the business community? And then looking at that, of course, in comparison to your other jurisdictions. The second part was a real sort of deep dive into the individual tax types and businesses. So we wanted to look at how are you charging businesses? How are they paying? How much are they paying? And how much is that in the sense of contributing to the city's revenue? So we wanted to look at those categories and fees and just kind of look at these 5 items here. Can we potentially increase revenues to the town? Can we increase some fairness and equity across the tax rates for local businesses? So everyone hopefully is paying something similar of a rate and we don't have any industries carrying a higher burden than others. We want to simplify the tax structure. We got to be honest, in many of the tax codes, and you're not the only one, these are things that were written sometimes as early as the 50s or 60s, maybe the 70s at the latest. And so we're dealing with some sort of industrial age tax codes that really can be sometimes not the most conducive to administering. And in general, it also creates some huge gaps in terms of your leakage, right? There's industries and economy does not look the same anymore. So you may be overburdening a certain class and not even taxing another group. And so we really wanted to kind of simplify the structure and update it to the current approach. Again, we want to always keep in mind having a business friendly approach to that. We want to make this as easy on the business community as possible and easy to learn, easy to adopt, and easy for the city to interact with them. And of course, last but not least, we want to make things simple for the city as well, right? If you've got overly complex and burdensome processes and procedures, you don't have systems in place to support, then no, it doesn't benefit anybody. The next thing that we did, as I talked about briefly, was look at this code. We really kind of tried to address, in looking at your code, a number of areas, looking for conflicts with operational practices. Many times over periods of time, management changes, staff changes, and suddenly you have processes and procedures in place that aren't even supported by the current tax code. So we want to look for any conflicts there. We want to modernize that language. As I said, some of this stuff is archaic. You know, there's still the language in there that talks about walking your alligator after dark. Maybe it's time to remove that. You know, impact on staff efficiency, as we said. And really best practices. You're not the only city looking at this. There are a lot of cities that have already done it and many that are in the pipeline to consider doing the same thing. And we want to try to follow some of those best practices, make sure you're getting the most out of it, as well as have the business community used to similar things in the area and across the state when they're doing business outside of the city. And again, as I touched on, loopholes in revenue leaks in the sense of what you're missing out on. So I'll start in briefly with just an overview of your revenue. As you can see here, we got some data back to 2013. 2020 revenue is not really reliable at this point, you know, due to COVID and some of those other things. We're still waiting on some good results there. But this trend really does give you a pretty good example of how relatively flat the revenue is. It's not really climbing like we would expect it to do over the course of this type of time frame. We also looked at just how that compares to the things that we do get and track on a more recent basis, like sales tax. So while that maybe only makes up about 30 to 40% of your business base that are collecting and remitting sales taxes, it is a good indicator of just how the economic base is moving in the city. We have a little volatility in 2017, but as you can see in general, year over year, we would expect the business tax percent change from 2013 to sort of mimic the sales tax, and we don't really see it follow that line as much. So that's a key indicator that it's time to potentially change the code as well. Who's paying? Well, unfortunately, this is one of those areas where we got into where there wasn't a lot of data and a lot of information to help us dive into some of the details. The only categories that we could get were your living accommodations, so residential rental property, commercial rental property, transportation groups, and agents and brokers. The rest of the city, almost 81% is all lumped into just a generic category. It's one of the things that we'll talk about just later in terms of some of the stuff that we definitely want to address and potentially look at. But that's currently how your data is showing and how the rate breaks out. So what does that mean for the business community? Well, in general, one of the things that we also want to look at is what is the effective tax rate that your businesses are paying? Is it equal? Is it far off? Is there a more progressive rate? Is there more of a regressive rate? And as we can see here from this chart, your average small business is paying 10 times the amount in terms of an effective tax rate of what your larger businesses may end up paying. And so that also, again, is a key indicator for us that there's potentially a need for an ordinance change and face some potential equity there amongst the tax base. We also took a look at all the neighboring jurisdictions. So to the extent possible, we gathered all of the data from some of the similar and surrounding jurisdictions, gathered some key demographic information, and then wanted to take a look at how much are they collecting, how much are the businesses paying. If we picked up a business from San Anselmo and moved it to Corte Madera, how much would they pay? And so you can keep competitive, obviously, with your neighboring jurisdictions, but also know which way the trends are moving and what's available out there in terms of an actual revenue pool. Next, we kind of consolidated all of this information together. So again, as we talked about, this is money that goes, into the general fund. It's what you're using from everything from roads to emergency services and police and fire. So where do you stand on that for how much revenue collecting per capita versus your neighboring jurisdiction? So we took a look at population and the total business tax revenue for those. And as you can see there, you guys are, sort of near the bottom in terms of what would be collected and used for the general fund per capita and how much you're generating for each of those things. This next section is going to cover sort of that category and fee analysis that we talked about. To the extent that we could, we broke this data out into some categories. So right now you're getting about $15,000 from contractors, primarily out of town ones. I'm guessing these are the people that come in to do jobs or services in the city, pull permits for maybe renovations on homes. Your general businesses, as we talked about, that's that big 80% bucket. That's about $191,000, about $180 average fee with a $15 minimum and about $4,700 maximum that we see anybody paying regardless of their income. And same here with the residential and commercial rentals and the transportation. So we just did a breakdown and analysis of what all these businesses are paying by category, as well as now on this slide, we can see by dollar amount. So what we're looking at here is you can see obviously the vast majority of the people are paying, basically between $1 and $50 a year. You've got your next group is somewhere paying up to 100, and then the numbers start to dwindle down to some smaller numbers of businesses that pay sort of anything between the $100 and $5,000 mark. And of course, we have nobody in the city paying more than $5,000.
That's surprising.
Yeah, the next thing we did is moved into sort of an analysis. So in order to look at your future fee structures, and because of the lack of some of the data that we had available, we had to really kind of sit down and try to develop some estimates on what the gross income is and what the total gross receipts are for the business community. So we looked at rental units and contractors and your general business as much as we could from the data that we had, and we put together some actual and estimate combinations to figure out how many people, how much money is your total pool. And it looks like about 500 million, right, give or take 510 million in total taxable gross receipts that are occurring in transactions in the city during the year. That's going to be a key value, for us to track going forward as we start looking at tax models and how we can apply them. So we looked at a very simple option first, right, which is just, hey, we know you have about $500 million of gross. If we just took a very simple approach to creating a base tax and a simple dollar per thousand, which is a pretty standard minimum rate in all cities across California now that are moving to this sort of option. Gross receipts taxes can get as high as about, they can get as high as $20 per thousand in some very rare exceptions. But in general, they range from about 50 cents to about $6 at the highest end on a normal sort of tax structure. So we went with that lowest number, what is typically average for most cities. And we said, okay, if we were to take out the structure that you currently have and add in something simple, what would it look like at $1 per thousand? What would it look like at $1.50 per thousand? And these are just some highlighted numbers of what your revenue potential can look like, going from that 250 or so, 220, up to 550 at the dollar per thousand, or up to 800,000 for $1.50 per thousand across the board. That rate has the way of simplifying and creating an equity. Again, everybody's paying the same thing. It's very simple, and it addresses all of your tax rates under one easy to do calculation. The other option we looked at was a more popular approach for cities that are looking for revenue. So they want to maximize revenue, but decrease the burden. And so one of the ways to do that is to do groupings and classifications. So we take some primary categories like general retail businesses, and we put them typically at the lower end because they typically have less profit margins. A grocery store doesn't have the margins that a doctor's office does. And so we want to spread that burden out across categories that can carry it a little easier. And similarly, things like property rentals typically have a higher margin because, well, let's face it, you can't move that business. It's stuck. It's stuck here. So that's one of the reasons why it carries a higher rate. But it also lets you take into account the effect that the business has on the city. Your retail places, while they may get a lot of foot traffic, also bring in other items, and they also contribute to your sales tax pool. So they're bringing in some additional sort of benefit to the city, and that may be one reason to consider having a lower rate. Whereas maybe some of the contractors and some of those other service levels or rental property doesn't really do anything to contribute anything else, and only really kind of becomes a drain on city services. So we took a look at kind of doing this as a base example. We think there's a lot more room to go here if we can hone in and do some refinement on some additional data. But right now, taking a conservative approach, again, some kind of category there could get you to that 875,000 mark, but allow you to potentially phase in some rates. So have something as low as 75 cents or $1 per thousand on some, maybe $3 on another, and something similar. And just FYI, so you know as well, this type of, not this exact model, but this type of model is what Sausalito just implemented last year, year and a half ago. And so they have they have 5 categories with 3 different tax rates ranging from $1 to $3 per thousand. And so that was just recently adopted by the voters in, I think, late 2018, and then it went live, I think, in 2019. My timing might be off a little bit, but they're under that new model now. We also, just at the town's request, took a bit of a look at a neighboring jurisdiction and decided to take Fairfax, and just said, well, if we took Fairfax's code and we simply just plopped it into your city and duplicated it completely, what would your revenue stream look like? And even that, under sort of their model, which we don't necessarily think is the best one, they'd probably need to redo theirs as well. But even that kind of tends to have an increase up to that $476,000 mark. So even kind of copying one of your neighboring jurisdictions definitely gives you a value add. We also added in the report a substantial amount of comparison tables, so you can have at your fingertips, you know, some of this analysis. Hey, what if I'm a hotel, or what if I'm a doctor's office, or what if I'm a contractor doing business in each of these cities on average? And so we put this table together so it gives you a pretty good view of what you are currently paying now and what you would currently pay in any of these other jurisdictions. And so that really kind of is helpful as you start to look at the impact. And when we start to move forward with any further refinement, really, we would start to modify this table and really get it down so you're comfortable with how that rates would impact the business community. Here we gave just a quick breakdown of the options for those models in the sense of what those sort of primary models that we recommend look like. Just under that current rate, you're paying this. Here's what you'd pay if we put in that $1 per thousand, and here's what you'd pay if we put in that $3 per thousand, and those revenue pools for those same doctors. So not just comparing what you're paying now to the other cities, but what would you pay under these new models for those other categories as well. And finally, just to sort of wrap things up, we want to talk about sort of options for moving forward. I think definitely one of the things that we talked about with Helen and I talked about earlier today was just further refinement of the tax model. We think there's a lot more we could do here to really dive into some more details to give you some comfort level that this is the right thing to do, and this is how it's going to impact your financials and the business's financials. Again, with some of that data, that we're comfortable in it. We wouldn't have put the report together if we weren't, but we think there's some room there for you to provide some direction, really hone in on a model and go further. Obviously, you can move forward with a tax measure. That is potentially necessary regardless. There's a lot of benefits from doing that, as we discussed, outside of just the revenue impact. There's a lot of the procedural changes that we talked about and things that can support, as well as some pretty obvious potential legal issues that it can help you avoid as well. The sort of landscape has been changing so much. COVID is really going to kick off a whole new set of challenges. There are a lot of new legislative actions that have come down in the last 3 years that put a lot of functions and requirements on business license in general across all of the cities and towns, and not having sort of a modernized code can kind of subject you to some potential legal challenges going forward. So there's a lot of benefit there for the tax measure, certainly something to consider moving forward with if you do. The other side is to consider in sort of enhancing internal operations. So as I said, you don't have to necessarily move forward with a tax measure. There's a lot of improvements that can be made based on what we've seen. Maybe that's a good idea to do first, because as we look at some of these things, they may help us refine the tax model going forward. That could mean enhancing your systems, providing some training, watching some of these new bills, making sure you're in compliance with some of the state law, trying to figure out how you can best work through some of those items internally to make yourself more efficient and cover yourself in between now and when you decide to move forward with a tax measure. And finally, as Helen and I discussed too, just given the nature of time and staffing resources and requirements, you could consider just offloading sort of the whole responsibility to someone like us or another firm that would be able to handle just all of this for you in one single swoop. So we're able to sort of come in and take over the day-to-day administration of the operation, enhance all of those processes, put in new systems and policies so people can file online and make payments and do their applications and their renewals over the phone and all of these other things that kind of come with some enhanced operations. And so you can look to a vendor such as ourselves to potentially fix that problem for you so you don't have to worry about it for any period of time. And with that, I've rambled for a little bit, so I'm totally interested in any questions or additional comments.
I have a few questions, if I may. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm still looking at your shared
Oh,
screen.
I will stop it. I will stop it.
Go for it, Laurie. Yes.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. I do have some questions. The first one is cleaning up the codes that you were talking about. And you use the example alligator, walking your alligator. Can you give me some examples realistically what we're talking about there?
Sure. I can maybe even pull the full detailed analysis up, but off the top of my head, I can give you some examples. Like many of the older codes will say things like the finance director shall inspect every business, right? Helen, nobody's going around to every business door to door and walking in to make sure they do things.
Okay.
Is it that big of a deal? No, but is that technically a violation of your code if it's still in there and you're not doing it? Yes. So it's things like that, right? And some other items that are more of a cleanup from some of the processes like charging for duplicate certificates. Well, there's all these weird things that can be in there that do you really need to charge someone because they changed their name? Or do you really need to do that? Technology and things nowadays don't require the same level of cost recovery that potentially was in there before. So examples like that.
Okay, and all right, so that's what the code that you're talking about is actually the code that relates directly to businesses or the business license to businesses around town. That's the code you're talking about?
Correct. So it's the town's municipal ordinance, and it is section 6.1 of that town's code.
Okay, and all right, thank you. I'm writing that down. I had a question about your categories. For instance, big retailer, there's 100 employees on that one. And on professional firm, you've got 15 employees. How did you come by those numbers, and can they be just decreased? And would it help us?
Yeah, so those are simply just analysis and placeholders. So we're not able to share specific business information. It's confidential. So what we do is just say, let's say we had a business with this. So if you have an example that you'd like, sort of laid out in one of these tables, hey, I'm looking for a restaurant that has 8 employees and makes about this much money. You could give us that, and we'd be happy to kind of do the math and put that on a table and calculate it. But there's no specific businesses behind these. It's just an example for purpose of comparison.
Okay, well, yeah, because to me, that just seems like an awful lot of employees, particularly for our town. We don't have a huge businesses. So that is something I would be interested in seeing, maybe if we could decrease that a little bit.
Of course.
The other question I had to you was, when you're talking about offloading it to the outside vendor, such as yourself, what is the cost to the town?
Yeah, that's a great question. Since I have the number right here, about 1,400. So typically our charges for doing the sort of full administration service are done on a per account basis. So for every account or license we issue, it's per account. That's probably about $15 or so, give or take, per year. So that comes out to maybe $17,000, $18,000 a year for the city to have sort of take that off their plate.
Okay.
Town,
all right.
town, I'm sorry.
Okay, so that it is a fairly substantial cost, depending on how much time it actually takes us or the town to do it compared to what you would have. Because I know that having been in business, I have done business licenses both ways, paid the town directly and or paid a vendor. And so I was curious about that cost. That's it for me for right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Stanley had question as well, and then Richard.
Oh, this is
Actually,
Richard.
Richard was first.
Oh, Richard was
okay.
first. Oh yeah,
sorry.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Stanley.
Thanks. A question that came up at our previous meeting related to enforcement and collections.
Yeah.
And I mean, do we have any clue, or for all I know, we may only be collecting 50% of the potential, that there may be, the other 50% are scofflaws who are avoiding it. Is there any way to have some sense perhaps of what percent we're currently collecting, businesses we're collecting from? And number one, and number two, what are some of the ways that we could perhaps increase collections and enforcement without imposing too great of a cost on staff? So any thoughts about that would be interesting.
That is a fantastic question. And actually, one of the things that we recommend prior to going to the ballot measure, you guys have, I think, probably plenty of time until the next general election anyway. But one of the things we always recommend is a thorough compliance review prior. It's going to give you the ability, when you're going out to vote and asking the voters to give more, confidence that you're getting as much as you can from what you have, right? And I think that's definitely an important thing. And the answer to that question is we don't know. It's part of our service. So if we take over the administration and the operation, then part of that includes a thorough, what we call compliance program that includes our discovery, which is the identification of all the businesses that are operating and aren't paying you. So if they're coming in from out of town and sneaking by, if they've managed to open up somewhere in town and not go through the process, or running a business from home nowadays is, just as easy as from a commercial building. So we identify all of those people, educate them, and bring them into compliance, collect the fees, and push them forward. The collections program just stays on top of the existing accounts from a delinquent perspective. And then, of course, we have an audit program that reviews the people that are paying you, but just ensuring that they're paying enough. So I don't have all that because we're not currently obviously doing that work. But in general, we find throughout the state, typically somewhere between 10 and 25% is in that underground sort of economy that's going uncollected. So if you've got 200 and something thousand, there's maybe another $50,000 out there that hasn't been collected yet.
Okay, great. Yeah, and maybe just to pass it on to Helen and Dave, if they have any sense at all of what, does that sound about right to you, the 10 to 25% or whatever of non-payment? Or I'm just curious if it's a big issue or in our town or not.
So from my perspective, I'm not complaining here, but our current situation is myself and the two staff working for finance department. We have payroll, AP, cash receipt.
Oh, right.
We in charge two agencies, fire and the town. So with limited staff timing, we really don't have any bandwidth for reinforcement side. With that said, pretty much we have no idea what business out there. It's kind of more on a volunteer basis come forward. From this year COVID-19 grant issue, some vendors, they wanted to apply grant, but unfortunately they need a business license, right? How few those kind of items they come forward, they have not been paid for last 5-6 years. For us, we have no way to know they're even existing out there. For example, some home occupation business, or like some keeping, or those kind of stuff. And also, for example, like a hair salon business. Last time I talked to Josh, technically one hair salon, you might be able to find 4 different type of business license you can collect, right? But for us, if we even get one, we're lucky, even though they're out on the street, but just we have no bandwidth to go enforce. I think last meeting, Stanley also mentioned about the Airbnb issues, right? That's we all left on the table. So, yeah, maybe, we dedicate some staff time or stuff kind of to focus on, maybe able to travel away, but moving forward ongoing basis, we don't really have bandwidth with that as well. I think, for example, this year, business license renewal, we starting since November, we have part-time employee help us, but, and also at the same time this year, we try to clean up some database, helping economic development committee to gather some email address, those kind of stuff. We try to clean our system. Almost, I will say this part-time employee, he will spend 70% time since November until now, clean up data, calling people, ask them, do research to see whether they paid last year or not. All those kind of work is kind of almost full-time job there.
Right.
So with that said, I think some help I definitely need, if we're able to take advantage of HDL or similar company. So yeah.
And that circles
Okay.
back, and Helen, and to what Helen said, it circles back about the data as well. One of the things that we noticed, especially during COVID, that was incredibly valuable for all of our clients across the state was we were able to, I think we sent something like 2.5 million notifications and emails out to the state for these exact reasons. So not just waiting for the business to apply for their PPP, but proactively reaching out, giving them help, right? Working with economic development and the chamber to talk to all the businesses, target in on, because I know here's the list of the beauty salons or the restaurants and the ones that are affected. I can send them an email. I can tell them all, all the information that needs to get communicated from the city to help them proactively do it and make sure they have their license in advance and all the things they needed to get the PPP. So yeah, it's important to have all that data as well for other reasons too, not just for business license, but the city can really provide some better services in general to the public.
On that same subject, may I go, Stanley, or you want on the same subject?
Well, I would like to have a chance to ask a few questions.
Oh,
Go for
yeah.
it, Stanley.
On the
Yep.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I raised the issue at the last meeting when this tax was or proposal was brought up about compliance and not really enforcement, just how can we, with all the Airbnbs, I mean, that's really a growing kind of trend in these kind of small suburban towns, people renting out rooms. It's a huge business, and the answer I got is we have no idea, and there is no enforcement, there is no compliance. It's money that's left on the table. And Joshua, thank you so much for your presentation, but I think you're absolutely correct that before we go and ask for a tax increase, we really have to clean house, and we have to make sure we're collecting at least a fair, we have an idea that we're actually collecting what we need, right? Or what we're owed. And then my question is, that's a comment really, I'm sorry. But I think at the last meeting, we also talked about the Chamber of Commerce somehow being tied in with the business license and maybe collecting a portion of the business license goes membership into the Chamber of Commerce. I don't remember exactly what that interplay is. Could you address that?
We have a number of relationships set up with chambers where we can facilitate chamber membership during application. So when a new business comes in and applies for their business license, there's a lot of things that typically you might want to do, right? One, want to check to see that they are operating in the correct zone, that they've got, all the things that they need. And one of those pieces of information that we can set up is here's a little blurb about the chamber. Join the chamber now. Check this box if you're interested in learning more. We can collect the fee potentially at the same time if they want to sign up and just make that a part of the process and help facilitate chamber membership. Or we can kind of just collect information. Sometimes it just depends on the chamber. They want to manage that relationship with the business. And so all we do is, if they check that box, we send something over to the chamber to give them data. But yeah, there's definitely room there for that interaction between, services of business license and the chamber. And just real quick to circle back on your short-term rental side, we actually have a part of our service that's included in our administration program that identifies short-term rentals, notifies them, educates them of the compliance, collects the appropriate taxes and fees, make sure that they're in compliance if you have any permitting regulations. So if you say, okay, we allow this, but you have to make sure you have appropriate parking, or you can't, have a party after 10, or whatever the things are that are typically concerns with the neighborhood, we manage that and collect it. The only concern I would have, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but typically the biggest benefit from that is your TOT, which I don't think you guys have. Or do you, Helen? No, yeah, you don't have a TOT. So there's not a lot of funding or revenue that can come. You're talking about maybe on the business tax side, $100 from some of these people. So if it's something to potentially consider, it would be more valuable to go through a regulatory process on the permit side, create a permit, adopt a fee, manage it, regulate them, and do that than maybe a revenue opportunity. But just a heads up there because of the lack of TOT.
Right.
What is TOT? TOT?
Oh, apologies. That's a transient occupancy tax. So that's a tax for
Hotel.
people when they stay in a hotel. Yeah.
Thank you.
We
Yeah.
talked about it last time, and we had conversation about the San Anselmo being the
Yep.
only hotel we have in town, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And also just after last meeting, I did a talk to staff. We kind of look into try to get some information for Airbnb. Actually, it's quite challenging to even dig into because their information is not really obvious. You're able to find. So we have to set up like a individual email address, try to looking for those kind of information. And it's kind of takes some work.
Yeah, it's a little bit creepy, right? You need to pretend you are booking somewhere, and then I know.
We actually can do it for you. It's not complicated. We have a whole system set up that is able to identify them and get the owner name and the contact.
Mhm.
It's just that, again, as I said, without some kind of infrastructure there on your side for a permit or something for a cost recovery,
Mhm.
we would have to charge you, a couple $100 per account, and there wouldn't be anything there for you to recover that. So if it's a major problem, I would recommend, I'm looking towards some kind of permitting ordinance so you can get a cost recovery, and then we can give you all that data and all those tools and put that in place for you.
Well, I have a question. Oops, Dave, you wanted to say. So the question I had, because I think a lot of the modeling that we would be able to do, or we should be starting to think about over the next, let's say, 18 months, 2 years, whatever it takes, is really based on data that the granularity of the data we need, we don't have it, right? And I think we talked about last time, and Dave and Helen, please refresh our memory about some step to start collecting more data that at some point, whatever it is, 12 months, whatever it is at time, we would have a better sense, because all of those tables here, until we really know how many how many of business are in that bucket, it's pretty much 85% is a big bucket of everything and nothing in there. So it seems to me that we are pretty weak in terms of doing any freaky modeling, if you allow my French here. So can you give us better sense about that system that you talked about last time, that it make more sense? And is it something that you were planning to do without the help of outsourcing this entire the model, or is it something we need to outsource as well, or is it something you can do on your own, or we can start doing on our own right now?
That's actually why I was raising my hand. Josh talked about it a little bit. We're going to move ahead with one of our work plan goals for that we're submitting to council. It was actually brought up by Council Member Feynman, and it's been something that we've been talking about. We don't really have a choice but to go to a model as Josh described. There's a number of companies we can certainly look into, but it's the only option for a small town our size is to have that help, and that is going to give us such a leg up in so many ways. We've talked about data. We've talked about the ability to kind of fix the problem of compliance and find out who isn't. Everything Josh described very quickly, it's kind of a tailor-made. And for $17,000 a year, yeah, it sounds like a lot initially, but if you look at the scope of what we're talking about, we're going to find that money pretty quickly, and we're going to get ourselves to the point where we're modernizing. That's separate from the going to the ballot, and that's something that we're really going to have to really think through. I mean, we have some great models to kind of work on. We have some challenges with the upcoming general elections with, the Measure D. We really need to go out with Measure D for the 2022. Measure D is a sales tax that we have that we're going to need to update. And because of the timing, we can't wait till 2024. So to go out with, unfortunately, with a business tax request and a sales tax request at the same time is probably not something we would ever put ourselves in the position of doing, which is too bad because, but that gives us runway, as Stanley mentioned last time and this time, to get ourselves in a better position of compliance through, maybe the registration system for Airbnbs. There's different, we are a small staff. We've made incredible headway over the last several years. We instituted a fee schedule that actually had a study behind it. With a small group in the administration and finance department, we're trying to get ourselves set up with these systems that are compliant with state law, that are going to get us the data that we want, and they're going to automate some things that take it off the plate of our 2 or 3 employees who have so many other things going on. So just so you know, that is, and I think we have pretty large amount of support on the council to do that. So that's actually in process, and we're gonna pull the trigger on that probably July 1 if it's accepted as part of our budget. So just a level set there, it's a no-brainer. And then actually we went to council before I was manager. This exact thing came to council. It wasn't quite as dialed in technologically because I think it was 6 years ago. And the council chose not to do it at that point for a number of different reasons. I think we have a lot, I think data has become much more important over the last 6 years. And I think that between the work we're doing with the Economic Development Committee and just getting, quite frankly, we manually mail out, hey, it's time to renew your business license. I mean, it's just very analog, so, town like San Anselmo really needs a better system. So just want to let everybody know that is in the works. And thank you to Councilmember Feynman for kind of pointing out the importance and need. And like I say, I don't think we'll have any, I think it's just so justifiable moving forward.
And typically, how long time after that? Is it like one full year to start getting the data and getting stuff in place? Joshua, what's your timeline? What do you see is really realistic for a town to start getting, what
Sure.
they are supposed to get and the data we need?
That's an easy question. So if we start with our timeline for implementation, right when we get the approved dollars on July 1, we have a deadline of November, hopefully get it done before, to have everything operational because we send out our, renewal letters, and then everybody has to pay by April
15th.
So all of that will be within the new system. So it's kind of the timing kind of works in our favor, and we'll start getting, we can customize when you log in, every field they fill in is going to help us because we're going to be able to filter with all those different fields. And with whatever company we go with, we'll have the sort of best practices to choose from. So just wanted to say there's just no question, we're doing that. And we don't have to push hard, I don't think. I think it's just something that is, like I say, a best practice. So with that, no, I just want to with that moving forward. And then the next thing we're going to do, and just back to the Airbnbs, our community, our planning director, not a community development director, has been tracking. She's a data miner. She actually does track kind of, sort of ad hoc in a way, all of the Airbnb activity. And, we've talked a lot about trying to get a system in place. The TOT model is more difficult than the registration model. So I feel like the registration model is probably, and so that is also something that's in the pipeline. It's just a matter of bandwidth to be able to get all this stuff done. But that's, both of those things San Anselmo's in need of. So we're going to take them as we have capacity to do so, but it's a no-brainer, and they've done it in other towns. So there's companies that actually will come in and help with that. HCL is one of those as well. But it's just, we need to get we need to modernize and get all that professional stuff set up. That's all.
Is there any other question? Yes, Alexis, yes.
I just have one question for now, which is, what do these kinds of campaigns look like in communities as opposed to sales tax campaigns or property taxes? I mean, how do they end up playing out, and what's the ugly underbelly, maybe, if there is one?
Yeah, that's a great question. In general, the trick here is in messaging, I think, and as long as we have the right messaging there, equity, enforcement, fairness, and across the board, that typically succeeds. When these pass, they pass, in the 70% range. The other key is that in these cases, the people that typically are voting are not the ones that are paying. Sales tax increase, a property tax increase, these are all on the consumer, right? So the people that are there and living there are the ones that are going to pay this increase. But the business tax, to the extent that you balance those correctly, people that are going to see an increase potentially in their property rental and that they're doing. Well, those people don't live there anyway. They're not voting. And so when the people that are there and living there typically vote, they tend to vote more for those that they don't have to pay for. I'll just be honest, right? And when you have a good message of equity and fairness, and that you can demonstrate that you're not just making a money grab, you're making improvements to the processes, it tends to pass with flying colors.
Yeah, I would chime in. The dark underbelly that Alexis is talking about is if there is a big player who feels that they're being unfairly treated and their ox is being gored, and they just mount a campaign in opposition.
Definitely possible. You guys know your community much better than I do. But in general, we've seen, like recently over in Sausalito, what they did as well is they did some polling, not a lot, but a little bit up front. And they also put in place an outreach to the business community, worked with the chamber to put all of this out there before the ballot measure and give all the businesses the opportunity to call in and then say, okay, how much would I pay under this new model? And work directly with the business tax department, right, to tell them, here's what it'll look like. And then they go, oh, okay, well, that's not that bad. It's only $20 more, or it's only this. But you're right, the guy that we tell him, no, it's going to be $10,000 more might be someone that we need to be careful for. So yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
But that goes back to the data. If we knew how many businesses we need each of those buckets, like Stanley is like, she's obsessed with the data. But truly, if we knew how many of businesses were in each bucket, we could probably figure out where is it going to hurt, if it does hurt somewhere, right? Yeah.
Well, and even without that data, it seems like it's pretty clearly regressive, which I think is a good pitch to change from my perspective. But
it's a good place to start. I agree with you. Yeah. Any other question, Laurie? She's like, okay, I want to make sure you have all your questions in before 7:30. Eric, any question? Hello, by the way, we didn't welcome you. I know you came a little bit late. We're happy to see you. I don't know why your name is written Ellen U. Scott, but we know it's you. So Dave, do you have any, if we don't have any more questions, do you want to kind of, are we done with this meeting then?
Yeah, we just wanted to kind of get you guys the results of the study that was done, which you've seen now, and I think it's something that, it's once again one of those things that's building our capacity to understand how the money flows in and out of the city and what our opportunities are to kind of get, like I call it modernized, just sort of, we have a lot of things in small towns that, so I like the example of walking your alligator. We often will, as we're doing our work, we'll find really old things that are really from the turn of the century of last century, and you just clean those things up as you can. So part of the work that we're going to do will help with all of that. I think that the first step in all of this is to get ourselves into the new system that I described. I think that's going to kind of be the first step towards all of this. And I think, because we probably have a little bit of time before we take a serious run at the business license tax, that we can, kind of work on that Airbnb registry. We have some work to do that will then inform how we roll out the idea and get maybe some council buy-in for this next step of the business license tax. So, it's one of those things. I think it's kind of been amazing. This group has really, had exposure to things that I wish Alexis actually asked for recordings of all the meetings because she came on as a new council liaison, and it was great because now that's sort of a body of work that you can send people back to kind of municipal finances, a mystery until you kind of get these opportunities to hear people like Josh or the person that came and talked about our pension. So I think it's really valuable. So the only outcome tonight is really that kind of capacity building. We're not making any decisions, but I think it's great. It helps. I tell you, it helps Helen and me as well. We're such generalists. We have to deal with so many things. When we get to partner up with an incredible company like HDL to help us understand it better, it's great. It's just really valuable. So that was really the point of tonight. And I think that, I also wanted to let everybody know that we are going forward with the the hosted business license solution one way or another, which is, something we've
Fantastic.
been wanting to do that for a long time. And I think it's the right time to get that in place. And I know Helen and I are a little bit crazily over the moon about it. We were almost high-fiving here because
Happy
it's
birthday, Helen.
We can tell.
well, it's one. I mean, you should see how manual it is. We have a really great part-time person processing all of it, but it's just that would all be pushed off to the cloud and be much more efficient, and we get much more better data, and that person can then be redirected to do other tasks. So anyway, that's really the point.
We are good for that topic. I just want to make sure there is no other public who might have come during the meeting. Is there any public who might have joined and have some questions, or are we ready to kind of talk about the next future agenda items? Yes, my food, sorry.
There are no public in attendance at this time.
Okay, thank you so much.
But we never got to see Eric or David. They've been
No,
dark.
Eric is here.
Eric popped on for a minute.
No, Eric is here.
Oh, that's right. He's Helen.
He's
Yeah,
Helen.
Yeah, exactly. I had a problem with, I didn't have a private link, so Helen sent me a duplicate of hers.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so future agenda items, is something you want to something here for you, Dave, for the next meeting?
No, I wanted to cut our HDL partners loose. You don't need to be here.
Oh, you're right. Absolutely, you're right.
Thank you guys so much for your time tonight.
Thank you guys very much for the opportunity. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful
Thank
evening.
you, everyone.
Thank you for all of you. Bye.
Right. So first I wanted to give, obviously before I go into what I hope to start marching into, I wanted to hear from the committee if there's something you have interest in as far as the future agenda item. Otherwise, I'll make my suggestion. Anything? Okay. Well, I'd like to make a pitch that our next meeting, we start looking at that Measure D.
The Measure D?
Hey, it's the pension obligation bond.
Oh, right. Oh, thank you, Helen. So we have been working with a bond. I don't even know how you. What would they be called? The Pressman Group.
Financial advisor.
Financial advisor. This all came about with you. You guys were kind enough to throw a meeting together to hear about what we're doing with the pension obligations with the Central Marin Police Authority. Back in, I think it was December, and we came we came to council in January, and council unanimously approved moving our safety UAL with the Central Marin UAL into a pension obligation bond. There was a meeting, just the meeting I mentioned that was 8 minutes was actually one of the final steps to get that into place. And you saw how many dollars that's going to save us. It's it's great. So the town is looking at that same process for our remaining, what do you call it? Just our normal UAL for the non-safety folks.
Yeah, miscellaneous group and fund liability.
Yeah, so we have the $8 million in pension debt that we'd like to look at potentially bonding out too, because the rates are still favorable. They're changing certainly, but they're still, compared to what we get with CalPERS, they're very favorable. So we would like to have a meeting with you in mid-April to receive the presentation on what that might look like with us. We had tentatively said the 15th of April, and I think that worked for everybody. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be there for that one, but maybe that's okay. So I think it was the 15th of April. Oh, Helen, you got this.
I will try.
I can see that on her face.
It's the same team as who you heard in December, but it's just our numbers. So
yes,
you kind of have a primer already, and just kind of looking at what that could look like to us as far as the annual savings. And it's the timing is just all working in everybody's favor to kind of look at these things. And it could be something that really gets us set on a payment that is assured. Instead of kind of rolling with what CalPERS is doing, we'd have something a little more secure. So anyway, we would like to have that meeting if it works for everybody on the 15th of April. We'll send a announcement out for it, and and then maybe that I'd like to get on Measure D sooner than later, even though it's not till November of 2022. It's never too early to start really thinking it through and analyzing what we might want to do, including potentially expanding it for revenue for other programs within the town. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. So yeah, thank you, Helen. So the 15th, yeah.
Sorry,
Bye,
I have to
Marie.
go.
Thank
Thank
you.
Okay,
you.
goodbye,
That
Laurie.
was-
See you on the 15th.
That was really interesting. Thank you.
It was a good meeting, yes. So we are setting that up for the next in the next 3 weeks, and that in the on the 15th we will decide when is our next date. You know, measure D
Yeah.
or whatever. There was also the didn't we talked about a common meeting with
Joint meeting.
the joint meeting, correct?
Mhm.
And we didn't have with the capital folks, and we
Oh,
don't have a
right,
date for
with
that.
the capital
Correct.
Capital program.
With the
monitoring
capital
committee.
program.
Yeah, how about the May 6th?
Yeah, we're pushing you guys kind of hard with these meetings. If it's too much, you know, I think the idea, I'd like to see that, obviously, as I mentioned before, I'd like that annually where we come together.
May 6th.
If you guys are okay, that's going to be a meeting every 3 weeks. This particular group was slated to be a quarterly meeting, but I think we're hitting the ground running and we're finding a lot of need for extra
But this
meetings.
is every 3 weeks. That's
Yeah,
us coming
you know
up
what?
weekly
It's
at
It's worth it. It helps us to get a kind of a group think around all this stuff. So thank you guys for your willingness. So 4:15, and we'll make sure we'll confirm with Sean and the Public Works Department about May
May
6th.
6th. And then Measure D will be after that.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll go to June, you know, push that off a little bit so we don't have to keep pushing you guys so hard.
Every week. Yes. That sounds a good idea.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we have at least 2 dates, one for sure and one tentative for May 6th. So I think we're good with that. So I think we are ready to adjourn the meeting and talk to you in 3 weeks. Be safe, get your vaccine. I'm going back to bed. I'm starting getting the chill again. So yeah.
Thanks for being
Take
such
care.
a trooper. Such a trooper.
Yeah, going back to bed now. You take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Buddy.
Everyone.